I never imagined a $79 DNA test could unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. It started at my cousin's 4th of July barbecue. We were sitting around the patio, laughing about family stories, when my younger cousin pulled out a DNA kit and joked that we should all find out who had the most unexpected ancestry. "I bet Grandpa wasn't as Irish as he claimed," he laughed. Everyone thought it was funny. So did I. A week later, I mailed him my sample without another thought. I expected a colorful chart showing percentages from different countries. Maybe I'd discover a distant relative somewhere in Europe. Instead, 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a notification that changed my life. New close family match detected. I smiled, assuming one of my cousins had taken the test too. Then I opened the app. My smile disappeared. The screen showed one name I had never seen before. Emily Dawson. Predicted relationship, half-sister. I stared at the words for what felt like 5 minutes. There had to be some mistake. My father, Richard Carter, had died 2 years earlier. He'd been married to my mother for over 40 years. He was respected across Denver as a businessman, a generous donor, and the kind of father every kid wished they had. A secret daughter? It didn't make any sense. I closed the app and reopened it. The result didn't change. That evening, I called the DNA company's customer support. The representative patiently explained that close family matches were extremely accurate. Could there be an error? I asked. It's very uncommon, she replied. We recommend contacting the match if you're comfortable. Comfortable? There wasn't a chance. I convinced myself someone else's sample had been mislabeled. For 2 days, I ignored it. Then I received a message. It was from Emily. "Hi, Michael. I know this must be shocking. I didn't expect it either. I'm not looking to cause problems. I only want to understand the truth." I didn't answer. Instead, I spent the rest of the night digging through old family photo albums. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. Nothing hinted that my father had another child. My mother had never mentioned anyone named Emily. Neither had my father. By the 3rd day, curiosity finally defeated fear. I replied with a single sentence. "Who are you?" Her response came almost immediately. "I think we're asking the same question." We agreed to meet in a quiet coffee shop halfway between our cities that Saturday. The entire drive, I rehearsed reasons why this couldn't possibly be real. Maybe she'd mistaken my father for someone else. Maybe there was a laboratory error. Maybe she wanted money. I walked into the cafe expecting confrontation. Instead, I found a woman sitting alone by the window, nervously stirring a cup of untouched coffee. She looked up as I approached. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Her eyes. They were the exact same deep blue as my father's. Not similar. Identical. She stood slowly. "You must be Michael." I nodded without speaking. She gave a nervous smile. "I've been trying to figure out how to start this conversation for weeks." "So have I." We sat down in silence. Finally, she slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. The first showed a young woman holding a baby. Written on the back were the words, "Emily. 6 months old." The second photograph stopped me cold. My father was standing beside that same woman. He looked 25 years younger. His arm rested gently around her shoulders. They were smiling. I'd never seen the picture before. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "It belonged to my mother." I couldn't stop staring. My father looked genuinely happy. Not like someone caught in a secret. Like someone building a life. Emily spoke quietly. My mom told me very little before she died. Only that my father's name was Richard Carter. I looked back at the photograph. My dad never said a word. I believe that. There wasn't anger in her voice. Only sadness. She reached into her purse again and placed a folded birth certificate on the table. Father. Richard Allen Carter. The same full name printed on every legal document I'd ever signed after inheriting his estate. I felt my chest tighten. This still doesn't prove anything, I said, more to convince myself than her. I know. She nodded calmly. That's why I took the DNA test. For several minutes, we simply talked. About our childhoods. About our parents. About completely different lives lived only a few states apart. The strangest part wasn't how different we were. It was how much we had in common. We both loved hiking. We both hated seafood. We both had inherited our father's habit of rubbing our chin whenever we were thinking. Every new similarity chipped away at my certainty. Before leaving, Emily looked directly at me. I don't want your money. I raised an eyebrow. I wanted answers. I believed her. At least. I wanted to. 2 days later, everything changed again. A certified envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a formal legal notice. Emily had retained an attorney to challenge my father's estate. My heart sank. The filing stated that newly discovered evidence established her as Richard Carter's biological daughter and that she intended to pursue her legal rights regarding the inheritance. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers. Just days earlier, she'd told me she wasn't interested in money. Now there was a lawsuit. I picked up my phone and called her immediately. She answered on the second ring. I was hoping you'd call, she said softly. Then explain this. There was a long pause. Finally, she sighed. My attorney insisted on filing before the legal deadline expired. So this is about the money. No, she replied firmly. It's about making sure the truth can't be buried again. I wanted to believe her. But as I looked across my office at the framed photograph of my father smiling beside me on the day his will was signed, I couldn't ignore the question echoing in my mind. Had my father hidden a daughter? Or had someone else hidden her from both of us? The question haunted me for days. If Emily was telling the truth, then my father had carried a secret for nearly 4 decades. But the man I knew wasn't careless. He planned everything from business deals to family vacations with almost obsessive attention to detail. Secrets didn't fit the man I remembered. I started where any real estate developer would. Paperwork. My father's estate attorney, Daniel Brooks, agreed to meet me the following morning. When I placed Emily's birth certificate on his desk, the color drained from his face. I was wondering if this day would ever come, he murmured. You knew. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I knew there was someone your father desperately wanted to find before he died. You never thought to tell me. It wasn't my secret to tell. I leaned forward. Then tell me whose secret it was. Daniel hesitated before unlocking a small filing cabinet behind his desk. From the bottom drawer, he removed a worn envelope addressed in my father's unmistakable handwriting. If Michael ever learns the truth, give him the storage key. Inside was a small brass key with a faded label. Storage Unit 214. That afternoon, I drove across Denver to an aging storage facility tucked behind a row of warehouses. The manager checked the records. The unit's been paid for years, he said. No one's opened it since your father passed. The metal door rattled upward. Dust floated through the sunlight. Inside wasn't furniture or old business records. It was a life. Shelves were lined with photo albums, greeting cards, children's drawings, and carefully labeled boxes. Every label had the same name. Emily. My hands trembled as I opened the first box. Inside were birthday cards for every year of her life. Happy 8th birthday. Happy 16th birthday. Congratulations on nursing school. None had ever been mailed. Another box contained Christmas presents still wrapped in faded paper. A stuffed bear. A graduation bracelet. A tiny silver necklace. Every gift carried a tag. Love, Dad. I could barely breathe. Near the back of the unit sat a battered leather journal. It wasn't a diary. It was a record of every attempt my father had made to contact Emily. Phone calls never returned. Letters sent back unopened. Private investigators hired to locate her. Then one final entry stopped me cold. Margaret says contacting Emily now will destroy both families. She begged me to let it go. Maybe she's right. But I hope one day my children know I never stopped loving either of them. Margaret. My aunt. The woman who had insisted Emily was lying. Suddenly, every conversation we'd had over the past week felt different. I drove straight to her house. She opened the door with a forced smile. I was wondering when you'd come. You knew. She didn't answer. I held up the journal. You kept them apart. Her shoulders sagged. I was trying to protect your mother. By lying to everyone. It wasn't supposed to last forever. 37 years sounds like forever. Tears filled her eyes. Your father wanted to tell your mother everything. I convinced him not to. She was recovering from heart surgery. I thought the truth would destroy her. And after that? It became harder every year. I stepped back, unable to recognize the woman who had practically helped raise me. You stole decades from both of us. She whispered something I almost didn't hear. I know. The courtroom was packed 3 weeks later. Reporters had caught wind of the inheritance dispute involving my father's multimillion-dollar estate. Emily sat across the room with her attorney. She looked exhausted. Not triumphant. Just tired. Judge Rebecca Hall reviewed the evidence one piece at a time. The DNA report. The birth certificate. The photographs. The journal. The unopened letters. Then Daniel Brooks stood. Your Honor, there is one final item my client requested be presented only if both of his children were together. A television monitor was rolled into the courtroom. My father's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than I remembered, but his smile was unmistakable. If you're watching this, he began, then I waited too long. The room fell silent. I made mistakes that no amount of money can fix. He paused, fighting back emotion. Emily, if you're seeing this, I want you to know I searched for you for years. Emily covered her mouth. I wasn't brave enough to tell the truth when I should have. That's my greatest regret. Then he looked directly into the camera. Michael, you've always tried to do what's right. I felt my throat tighten. If the two of you ever meet, please don't spend your lives fighting over my failures. He smiled sadly. Money can be divided. A long pause. Family can't be replaced. The video ended. No one spoke. Even the attorneys seemed unable to move. Judge Hall quietly removed her glasses. This court can decide property, she said. It cannot repair lost time. After a short recess, my attorney leaned toward me. The evidence is strong. We can continue litigating, negotiate, or appeal later if necessary. I looked across the courtroom. Emily wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the blank television screen where our father had just spoken to us both. For the first time, I realized we weren't opponents. We were two children mourning the same man from opposite sides of the same secret. I stood before anyone could stop me. "I'd like to address the court." Judge Hall nodded. I turned toward Emily. "When I first saw your name, I thought you were trying to steal my father's fortune." My voice shook. I was wrong. She looked up, tears already filling her eyes. "My father left me more than $18 million. I paused. "But after everything I've learned, keeping it all would mean repeating the same mistake he spent his life regretting." The courtroom became perfectly still. "I'll divide the inheritance equally." My attorney looked stunned. Emily slowly stood. "I never wanted to take your family away," she whispered. "You didn't." I managed a small smile. "You were family all along." She crossed the room. For one awkward second, neither of us knew what to do. Then we hugged. Not because a judge ordered us to. Not because lawyers negotiated it. Because 40 years of silence had finally come to an end. 6 months later, Emily flew to Denver for Thanksgiving. For the first time, there were 2 framed childhood photos sitting beside each other on my fireplace. One of me. One of her. Different lives. The same father. Before dinner, we visited his grave together. Neither of us blamed him anymore. He had made painful choices. Others had made worse ones. But in the end, the truth had done what money never could. It gave both of us something we'd spent our entire lives missing. A brother. A sister. Sometimes people ask whether I regret taking that DNA test. I always give the same answer. It didn't cost me half my inheritance. It gave me back a family I never knew I had.